Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of NikonTV. Now if you are noticing that the set is a little bit different and you don't know why, then the phrase "may the fourth be with you" probably doesn't mean anything, but that's okay. Let's jump on into the episode. Now, last time, back in February, we did a star points episode. So that was part one of the night photography series of episodes that I was doing. So we talked very specifically about star points, figuring out the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. If anybody remembers the rule that I talked about for how to figure out your shutter speed, throw it down in the comments below. I'm curious how many of you remember. So we talked about that. Now with today's episode, what we're going to be talking about is still night photography, but now we're going to be adding in talking about star trails along with a little bit of light painting near the end. But before I actually get into that, I want to talk about a couple things new within the Nikon world right about now. So the first is our Capture the Savings sales event that we currently have going on. So if you are a Nikon user or you want to be a Nikon user and you've been thinking about or hoping about getting some new Nikon gear, I would definitely go recommend checking out, if you can in person, but definitely online, your local dealer that you love shopping with. Go check out their website because we have a ton of Nikon gear on sale right now. We have D850s on sale for $500 off, whether you're looking for the body or the kit. We have pretty much every single Z body on sale. Z6, Z7 on crazy deals, Z6 II, Z7 II, they're even on sale. The Z5 though is definitely the takeaway piece with an oh my god price. We're talking about $500 off the entry point mirrorless full frame camera in our lineup, $500 off, whether you buy the body or whether you buy the kit. And that Z5 is just an amazing deal as it is, considering the fact that it's our first entry point camera within the mirrorless full frame world. You get in-body image stabilization, you get full weather sealing, you have 273 hybrid AF points with 90% coverage across the entire frame. So amazing specs on this camera. So with it being now $500 off, you're getting a really, really good savings. But if you don't want a body or you let's say already have one you're happy with, we also have a ton of lenses on sale. Again, it doesn't matter if you're a DSLR shooter or a mirrorless shooter. We have our Z Nikkor lenses or our F-mount Nikkor lenses, a bunch of them on sale in both categories. So if you are curious about some of the savings, go check out your local dealer and see what savings are going to kind of pique your interest. Now, the next news that's come out recently when it comes to the Nikon world is we've recently launched in the last week and a half or so a new firmware for all of our Z bodies. So if you own any Z body, I'm talking Z50, Z5, Z6, Z7, Z6 II, Z7 II, any of those, go check out the website and download it and get it onto your camera. There are going to be some small improvements, like I believe, let's say the Z5 will go and get the save focus position option. Not just the Z5 gets it, but a bunch of them do. The save focus position, it just basically allows you to tell the camera when you turn it off, remember that focusing position for when you turn it back on. Not everybody's going to need or desperately want that upgrade, but for those people who do, it could be a lifesaver. The biggest improvements you will see though are going to be on the Z6 II and Z7 II. You do get better low light autofocusing performance. The Z5 is included in that as well. But for specifically just for the Z6 II and Z7 II, you are going to have stickier tracking when it comes to using eye or face detect. And you will be getting slightly better overall tracking capability as well. So if you are a Z6 II, Z7 II, go check out that firmware. But as I've mentioned before, and I love this feature, you don't have to, if you're a Generation 2 user, you don't have to go onto the website and download it the old-fashioned way. You can actually go and just use your Snapbridge app, which you should have connected to your phone, and you can just go through Snapbridge and say, get the new firmware. And then it will download it to your phone. From there, it will go and transfer it to your memory card. You do have to have a memory card in your Z6 II or Z7 II. And from there, it will just allow you to very quickly follow the steps and go and update the firmware right in camera. So a couple little tips on that. If you are a Z6 II or Z7 II, I would recommend still formatting your memory card before going and doing this. We all know that to make sure that you're as safe as possible, if you're taking photos, just photos and videos should be on your memory card. You shouldn't have any other files on there, which means after you've done the firmware update, go and format your memory card to go and get rid of that firmware file on there. And when you're doing firmware updates, you shouldn't be having photos or videos on there or have it been in another camera using it. So always make sure to format before you do the firmware upgrade and after you do the firmware upgrade. Then you'll be good. Okay, so let's actually talk about the meat and potatoes of this episode. We're going to be talking about star trails. Now, there are two different ways for you to go and shoot star trails. There's the quick method and there's the multi-shot method. The quick method, I don't normally recommend this to people. It's not the usual recommended approach. It's, to be honest, the way I usually shoot it, but I don't know if that's because I'm lazy or I'm just trying to go and see exactly what the camera is capable of doing. But regardless, there's the quick method. Now, the quick method means that you're literally taking one very, very long exposure. So instead of a 20-second long exposure, you could be doing a 20-minute long exposure so that you would actually be able to see the star trails right in camera when you're done editing or when you're done shooting. So how do you actually come up with this exposure? Because it's going to be obviously a little bit different than figuring out the way that I told you with the rule of 400, hint, hint, that's what I asked earlier, and your ISO and aperture. So there's a slightly different way. Well, you can go and use an app, which is, there's a lot of apps out there that you just basically tell it your star point settings, and then it'll go and translate that into however long you want to go and shoot for. But there's actually a really, really easy and cool way to be able to figure it out. My buddy JC told me this and I didn't believe it because it just seemed too simple. But basically, if you have your star point exposure and your ISO is 6400, let's say it's 20 seconds at 6400, the 6400 is key. That when you go and switch that and you want to go and shoot star points, the shutter speed in seconds is now the shutter speed in minutes with your ISO at 100. So 20 seconds at ISO 6400 is 20 minutes at ISO 100. I know, it seems too simple. It really honestly does. But if you actually work it out and you count out the different stops, it's not exactly, but it's very, very close. So if you work out exactly, it's like 21 and a bit minutes versus 20. But it's really, really close and it will get you incredibly close to your final exposure for your star trails. So that's a really easy way to do your star trails using the one-shot method. Next, there is the multi-shot method, which is what is recommended because the one-shot method, there is very little margin for error. If something goes wrong, the entire photo is essentially ruined and you got to start over from scratch. Let's say at the very end of your exposure, you accidentally kick your tripod and it shifts it all over the place. Well, that exposure is now completely ruined and you got to chuck it out and start over from scratch. But with the multi-shot method, what you are actually doing is you're shooting 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 150, 250, however many shots it requires, which again, you find out from your app. And you will then take those individual files and you will merge them together into a single long star trail shot. So it's really, really cool. So how do we go and do this? Well, your base exposure, can you believe it? It's going to be the same as your star points. Remember back that last episode, I told you guys that learning the star points would really help you out for every other type of night photography. And again, it shows how powerful it can be. So you're going to use your star point, your rule of 400, figure out your aperture at wide open, and then figure out your ISO, probably between the 4000 and 6400 range. And then you're going to go into an option within the camera that's called interval timer shooting. Now, when you go to interval timer shooting, you are going to have a number of different options. So you can actually tell the camera what time of day to go and shoot. The biggest one, which I'll come back to in a second, is interval. Then you go tell it how many shots. In this case, there's, let's say, 29 shots that are going to be taken. And then you can turn on things like exposure smoothing, silent photography. These will be a little bit different depending on the model you're shooting with. But the biggest one, as I mentioned, is interval. Now, when people see interval as the option, they think that's just the interval between shots, but it's actually encompassing the shutter speed along with that interval after between the shots. So if, let's say, you want an interval of 1 second between your shots, and your shutter speed is 20 seconds, you would go and set your interval to 21 seconds. That is really key because a lot of people mess that up. They think that it's only just that 1 second. They'll set the 1 second and then they'll not understand why their shooting sequence didn't work out the way they had hoped. So that is really, really key, making sure that that is just your, that's not just your interval, but it's including your shutter speed as well. Now, what do you want your interval to be? I use 1 second as an exposure. That's usually what I set mine to, basically the smallest interval. But why wouldn't I want it to be a 5 or 10 second long interval? Well, you have to keep in mind that you're wanting to basically record the movement as much as you can of the stars throughout their entire trip. Well, what happens if you have a big gap where your camera's doing nothing, but the stars are still moving? You will have a gap in your photo. We actually have one of my co-workers, Russ Vandler out from Alberta. He's really gotten into night photography, specifically chasing the northern lights, the aurora borealis recently. So when he was out, I actually asked him, I said, Russ, I know it's a bit of a time suck, but can you actually go and shoot me a what not to do when it comes to shooting star trail sequences? Can you go and shoot with a longer gap for your interval so that we can go and show people? So as I'm actually zooming in here, what you're noticing is that it's not one singular long trail. You can actually see the gaps in between, and that's because too long of an interval was actually used. So it's very key to keep the interval as small as possible, usually at around 1 second when you're doing star trails. Now, if anybody is curious, and if anybody does want to go and try and twist Russ's rubber arm, he's, as I mentioned, doing a lot of northern light shooting. If anybody wants a part 3, I was only going to have this be a part 2 night photography series, but if anybody is curious and wants a part 3, write it in the comments below. Try and go and twist Russ's arm, and I can go and have him as a guest, and we can go and talk about northern lights. I've unfortunately never been lucky enough to see them. He lives up in Edmonton. I know he lives in Edmonton, but one of the benefits of living in Edmonton is you get access to the northern lights so many times of the year. So if you do want to go and hear about the northern lights directly from Russ, who's really gotten into it, write it in the comments below, and we'll try and turn this into a part 3 series. Sorry, Russ. Okay, so where was I? I was talking about interval. Okay, now, so what happens is you go then tell it how many shots, you've told it the interval between shots, and you say go. Now, you wait. That's all you have to do. You essentially are just waiting for that sequence to be finished, and then you take those, let's say, 100 shots, you combine them afterwards in post-production, whether it's in Photoshop or dedicated apps like Star Stacker or Image Stacker or Star Stacks, I think there are a couple other ones. So you can go and use all those third-party software, and then you have your finished time-lapse. Perfect. Well, is that it? You've gone through all of that just to get one image? Well, yes, but you can, because you have those individual shots, you can actually go and turn them into a time-lapse. So again, using different software, whether it's Adobe Premiere, LR time-lapse, you can go and combine all those shots together and have an actual moving movie sequence. Really, really cool. Now, one thing I will talk about is that I didn't go through the bottom section of this menu when I was in the interval timer shooting. And if you do, now you have to be using a D6, a D780, a Z6 II, or a Z7 II, so basically any of the new cameras in the last little bit. And if you go down into the second row of this menu, you'll actually see options. So if you go into options, you have time-lapse movie. So what this means is you can go and tell the camera to not only record your individual still photos, your RAWs that you're going to go and edit for your single photo, but you can go and tell the camera to go and build an actual movie for you that is ready to share right out of the camera. Absolutely amazing. I absolutely love this, because before it was always, you get the choice. You either have to go and shoot an inbuilt movie that is ready to share, or you have to go and shoot your still images. Now you get the best of both worlds. Okay, so we've talked about star trails. Now let's talk a little bit about light painting. So again, just like I mentioned with the multi-shot method with star trails, when you start going and doing your light painting, your base exposure is star points. Rule of 400, aperture wide open, ISO to taste, 4000 to 6400, depending on your scene to start with, and then kind of play with it. So why would you go and do light painting? The natural world is beautiful enough as it is. Why go and, well, it is, but it really allows you to add your own kind of creative touch, your own creative flair to this already beautiful scene. So when it comes to light painting, I will say right off the bat that it can be a little bit frustrating because there is quite a bit of trial and error that comes into it. Because when you're first starting out, you're adding light in, whether you're using a headlamp, a flashlight, an LED video light, even one of our speed lights. You can just hit the burst, the test button, and burst a little bit of flash out there. So there's a number of different methods you can use to add light in, and you have to figure out how much light to add for every single scene. And every single scene is going to be a little bit different. So you could be out there shooting 10, 15, 20 shots and only come away with one where all of the lighting came together the way you wanted it. So it is definitely a little bit of trial and error, but it is so much fun when you get it right. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of walk you through an example. This is one that I took a couple years ago. I was on a relatively big trip. We went to Africa for almost a month, and one of the shots, obviously I wanted a bunch of animal shots, but one of the shots that I had in my head that I kind of pre-visualized and hoped for was to go and be able to shoot this light painted Milky Way shot. And we were camping in a truck. We were going to be at a bunch of beautiful sites. So I had wanted the kind of big, large African trees with the truck underneath, with the Milky Way. Well, guess what? 99% of the trip, cloudy and rainy weather the entire time. Okay, so the very last night, would you not believe, we were in Sesrium, one of the southern sections of Namibia. It was beautiful. The clouds had disappeared. I said, I gotta go shoot. I have to go and capture this, this Milky Way. So I ran out, and this was my base exposure. So you can see the outline of the tree. It's there. You can kind of see the truck. But now I wanted to go and add in my light. So I went behind the tree. I was going and using one of our radio triggers, our WR10 back then. Now the WR11, A or B, plugs into the camera. And then the WRT10 is what you actually trigger the camera with. You get about easily 60, 70 feet worth of range, more if you're lucky, if there's nothing impeding you. So I ran behind the tree, started the exposure, and then I had my headlamp, and I quickly went and panned it up into the tree, and then stopped. Now, what are you noticing about that? Well, it looks good. It's what I had kind of envisioned, not only doing the tree, but I also ran over to the truck and gave it a little bit of definition as well. But the light in the tree, it doesn't quite do it. It doesn't look natural to me. It doesn't look as if there's a campfire behind that tree. It looks very cool. It's a very bluish tint kind of light to it. So I had come prepared for this. I knew that I had wanted to kind of make it look as if there was maybe a campfire. So I actually brought one of our flash gel filters that comes with our SB5000, SB910, and all it does is it just takes your light and makes it much warmer. So using that filter, I again turned on the shutter, put the filter over top of my headlamp, went and shone it up into the tree, took the filter away, ran over to the truck, shone the cool light through the truck to get a little bit of separation in colors, and that's it. So it's really, really fun when that type of pre-visualization actually comes together and you're able to get a shot that you can now really kind of blow up to any size you want. It was really kind of what you had wanted as a photographer. So for me, I absolutely love that picture, and it's one of my favorites from the trip. So the next time you're out shooting at night, definitely go get your star points, go get your star trails if you can. If you're lucky enough, go get the northern lights like Russ. But definitely, if you're in the location that suits it, try some light painting because it's really cool and it's really fun. Alrighty, so we covered a lot today. We talked about the Capture the Saving Sales event. We talked about the new firmware. Definitely go get those if you're a Z owner already. And we really kind of finished off the Star Trails and light painting aspect of night photography. If you are curious and you do want to hear from Russ about the Northern Lights and turn this into a part 3, write that in the comments below. And even if you don't want to hear about the Northern Lights and you want something specific, be greedy. This is your time. I do these episodes for you guys to make sure that you guys get what you want to hear about. It's not just me blathering here about nothing anybody wants to hear about. So if there's something you want to hear about, write it in the comments below and I definitely will incorporate it into the next episode. All right, so I'm going to finish off quickly by saying if you do want to learn more about light painting, you can go check out Dave Black's blog. I think I linked that to one of mine last year. I'll go through it in the links below. Dave Black is fantastic, not just for his landscape light paintings. He also does macro. He does portraiture light paintings. Really, really cool stuff. But also, if you want to go and learn more about night photography, whether it's shooting panoramic night skies, whether it's really how to post-process your photos to really make the stars pop, go check out Monica Deviat's blog site because she does such an amazing job. She's a photographer out of Alberta as well, and she does such an amazing job of figuring out the best way of doing things for herself, and then just really simply being able to explain it to the rest of us in a way that, even though it could be a really technical topic, she does such an amazing job just explaining it and making it very simple to understand. So go check out those 2 blogs if you guys want more information. All right, well, until the next episode, I will say thank you very much for tuning in, and may the 4th be with you.